Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, boys and girls. So let's go with the lab. I'm going to stop sharing the video for a moment so we can focus on the instructions of this one. Let's go ahead and use the PDF for the instructions. So we have the server, we have the ISP, and we have router 2, router 1, and router 3 and 4. We have to configure static routes to get from router 1 to the server via the next hop of router 2, router 3, and router 4. And we have to configure a static route in router. Let me see if it was router 2 to get to the server to the ISP. Router 2 to get to the server and to the ISP. So let me go ahead and take a look at the instructions to see. Basically, we are configuring a static route to get to the 200. Okay, to get from the router 1 to the ISP server and to get from router 1 to the Ethernet 01, which is through this interface, the next hop of router 3. Next, we are configuring router 2 to get to the ISP and a static route, a default static route, and then we have Ethernet 01, Ethernet 01, which is the next hop of router 2, if I'm not mistaken, or the exit interface. Yeah, it's the exit interface of router 2 to get to the server. Now, the instructions are different because we are doing a little bit of changes due to packet tracer, but it's basically the same lab. Refer to the exhibit, task, refer to the topology. All physical cabling is in place. Routers 3 and 4 are fully configured and inaccessible. Configure static routes for various connectivity to the ISP and the LAN, which resides on router 4. Let me go ahead and validate the instructions here. So this is what we need to do. All physical connectivity is in place. Configure router 3 and 4 are fully and inaccessible. Router 3 are fully configured and inaccessible. Configure the static routes for various connectivity to the ISP and the LAN that resides on router 4. So we need to configure router 1 to ensure router 1 prefers router 2 when the traffic is destined to the server only. Configure the default route on router 2 to the ISP. It's actually that one over there. Configure the router 1 to ensure router 1 will use the router 2 for the router 4 LAN if the link fails between router 3 and 4. Okay. What else? We need to configure a route on router 1 to ensure that the router 1 prefers router 3 when traffic is destined to the router 4 LAN 10.4.41.0/24. So let's start working along with the router. The first router, actually, this is not the correct lab, so let me just close that one for now and open up the correct one. In the meantime, while that one is loading information, let's go ahead and continue analyzing this. Let's take a look at the lab. So in router 1, we're configuring the next hop, which is actually Ethernet 00 on router 2. The other hop, which is actually the Ethernet 00 on router 3, and the other, to get to the other, okay, and the administrative distance of 2 to make a backup route via router 2 in case the primary route fails. Okay, that's basically it. So if one of the primary routes fail, we have the backup with an administrative distance of 2. That is a floating route when we are configuring there exactly. Then we are configuring a static route, a default static route to get to the internet from router 2 to the internet. Let's start with the configurations. So we have to find router 1 and we have to start adding some commands there. First thing we do, we go to the CLI and execute the enable command. After doing the config D, we do IP route 10.0.41.10 255 255. For some reason, they are using all 255 here. That's interesting because they have different mask, but okay, just because it's the 30, but that shouldn't be the actual route. We should be using 252. Probably the person that configured this lab, he just decided to do it that way. Okay, let's do it as the way it's supposed to be. 252. That is the correct way to do it. So 10.0.12.2 is actually 255. So my mistake is actually 255, the ones that we need to use. Whoever did the lab, he was right. We need 255 there. Because of the static route configuration, in order to work, we need all 255. Let's do the following. So we're going to repeat the command, but we're going to change the next hop address to the 10.0.13.3. That is the Ethernet 00 in router 3, which is a hop address. It's actually this interface over here. You click and enter, and after adding that command, we execute IP route 10.0.41.0 and then 255.255.0. You see the error there? Yeah, we execute an incorrect mask. We will correct that in a minute. 12.2 and then 2. We do a control A here and we execute no. We are going to execute this one. We're basically fixing the command. It's actually 255.255.255.0 for the last two. That's what we are trying to fix. Let me just do a WR, and I'm going to write all those commands again just to cover a box. Or instead of that, let me do a show run just to validate that we have the right information. So we have the static routes. That's probably other routes that we have there previously configured. So we need to validate that these routes are there in the routing table and in the configuration. So we configure this one, the one with the administrative distance of 2, the default route, and the 13.3. Let me go ahead and do the following. Let me go ahead and copy this over there. Let me do a notepad and let me paste it there. I'm going to do the following. I'm going to do a no for all of them and then add them again. So we can have the same order than the configuration. It's not really a big change. It's basically adding the same information, but the only difference that we are doing here is that we will have the order that we want. It doesn't really make a lot of difference. But let me do that. Let me just copy this. I need the notepad. Control Z. So let me just copy there and go to this router. Config T and paste it. Now I'm going to add those lines again so we can have the structure order there for the configuration. Now, if we go to the show run, we are going to see the same order, hopefully. We are going to see we're going to see the same order than we have in the instructions. That's what we wanted. Let me do a WR here just to save the changes, and we are good with router 1. Let's go ahead and work along with the router 2 so we can have the default route configured correctly in router 2. So we are going to open the CLI and go to router 2. We are validating. We are actually there in router 2. We are going to execute the following. We are going to do config T, IP route, and then all zeros, and then 209.165.200.225. Where do we get this IP address? So it's basically the Ethernet 00 in the ISP. That's where we get it. After doing the write, we are able to now confirm that we have access. We can even do some validations. Let me try to do some validations there. Let me validate with some pings command. It's out of the scope of the lab. They're not asking for validation, but I want to do it anyway. So let me do a ping test here from router 2 to the internet, to the ISP. 209.165.200.225. The first one always fails, so after the second one, we have 100% there. Let me do a ping test to the IP address of the server, 10.0.41. If I'm not mistaken, is 10. Let me validate that real quick. Let me see if it is configured and we have an IP address for the server. It's actually 10.0.41.10. So I'm wondering if it is even configured in the server. It is actually there, but I don't think the mask is correctly configured. It should be 255.255.255.0. Maybe they made that mistake. Let me go there. So maybe the mask is actually the one that we have previously. It's 24. Let me validate that because maybe they have the mask incorrectly configured here. They have the correct mask. Gigabit 2 for the one. So this is the default gateway. Let me copy that and validate we have the correct default gateway. Looks like we didn't have the correct default gateway configured there. Let me do the ping test one more time and validate on that. Are we still having problems there? 41.10. Let me say 41.4 or 255. What are we doing here incorrectly? Do you guys see an error? I'm wondering if we have to do this 000. We have that at the beginning and the ping was working successfully. So maybe we have to do it like that. Yeah, we have to use that mask for some reason. That's very strange. Maybe there is some configuration in router 4 that we're not counting on. Let me do a short run to validate the configuration that we have in router 4. Apparently that is the correct IP address, but are we getting from the router to the PC? Yes, we are. That is very strange. Why is it that when we configure the server with the IP address of all 255s, it doesn't really work? So it should be working with this mask. But when we were doing the test, it didn't work. Let me validate on that real quick. Let me just close those. And let me clear the screen there. That is strange. So it worked here, but maybe there is something that we are missing in the configuration when we were running this. Let me validate something real quick. We were adding let's do a short run. We are adding the default routes to get there. We actually did that in router 1. That was done in router 1. Yeah, apparently everything is fine. But the only thing strange is that when we are doing the ping, we are not getting to that specific server. We are sending the ping to the 10.0.41.10. Okay, now we are able to get there. So maybe I was adding the incorrect IP address or something. or maybe there was a bug in packet tracer. That sometimes happens. That sometimes happens. Looks like we are good now. Let me just save everything here. Let me save the configuration. And we can do it with packets. We can even do the test here. Let me close those sessions, and you can see the successful ping test from the server to the router, or from the router to the server. We're fine now. So it was a little bit challenging, boys and girls. I want to congratulate you for keeping up the good work, for working as hard as possible to complete this lab. I see there is something missing that we're not counting on. This interface, there was some instructions in the other PDF about adding a default route to the ISP there. Let me check on those. Router 1 and router 2 should access the ISP. So we are missing this route in router 1. And that is something important that we need to add. So it looks like we are not done with this lab after all. Let me do a ping test to the internet just to validate connectivity. It's 25. I don't think that is the correct IP address according to this one. Yeah, it's 25. Let me validate that in router 2. Yes, we configured that in router 2, but we didn't configure it in router 1. So let's add it to the router 1. Let me just copy and paste it there. I'm going to copy this starting route and add it to the router 1. So config T. I'm going to paste it there. Control A. I'm going to delete this space, and there you go. After doing the WR, we can do a ping test to that specific address, 209.165.200.225. And there you go. Looks like that was the missing piece of the puzzle that we were missing there. This one has a little bit of a different response, but we are focusing our attention in the packet tracer version. So the only thing that we did a little bit different is that we added the route to the ISP for router 1 that was missing. But besides that, everything looks okay. We should be all good with this lab. So boys and girls, take care. I see you around. Let me just give you a farewell for today. It's been a great lab with a lot of learning, and I see you next class. Goodbye.